Hey everybody, Mike Miller, Herald Times, joined by columnist Jeremy Price, coming to you after Indiana's 33-28 loss to Penn State. Third straight loss for Indiana, heading into next week's Friday night game in Minneapolis. And you've seen this game before. Indiana, I think fairly, it's fair to say Indiana outplayed Penn State for a majority of the afternoon, outgained them 55, over 500 yards of offense, more first downs. Had a pretty nice day, all things considered, except for, yet again, Indiana shoots itself in the foot in key situations. Penalties, just weird bounces of the ball, weird happenings in the game. A 4th-and-1 call that just went awry, although I'm not so sure it was just a weird. We'll get to that, but it was just one of the many weird sequences in this game for Indiana, which again, challenges a ranked opponent, plays well for a large chunk of the game, but ultimately can't make the plays you need to win on this kind of stage to get this kind of win that has eluded it so often before. So
I think the good news coming off the dismal performance last week against Iowa is that this was at least a little more familiar in the sense that Indiana was in the game and played up to the level of competition. This is kind of what we've become a little more accustomed to. The game like last week where they get blown out, that's been sort of the exception rather than the rule lately. The bad side of that is that it still was very familiar in the sense that Indiana gave this game away in a large sense. And in a game that wound up a 5-point game, sometimes you could look at 1 or 2 plays that made a difference. You could look at 5, 6, 7, 8 plays that would have made a difference today, whether it was holding penalties, fumbles,
special teams,
terrible
special teams,
clock management,
no kidding,
just left and right, you name it. Just basically, if you boil it down, just execution was not at the level that it needs to be to win a game like this.
It's a sloppy team, and I think it's sloppy in its execution. It's sloppy in the coaching. It is sloppy in the way I think it handles its emotions. I think that you have these moments of prosperity that ultimately don't lead anywhere. It's kind of like we talked about, I guess you weren't here, but after the Ohio State game, it's like, yeah, we've seen this kind of effort from Indiana before against ranked opponents, but it never really leads anywhere. You saw the Ohio State game, didn't lead to anything against Iowa. We'll see. I have no confidence that this will lead to anything against Minnesota. Really, the track record is these games don't go anywhere. They're just kind of one-offs, and inside of them,
especially when they're home.
Yeah, exactly. They just don't go anywhere. It's just a game in neutral, a game that doesn't really do anything for you moving forward. But even in the game, you have these moments where you get big stops. You take a lead in the second half only to give up a 94-yard return or something like that. It's just the mental maturity, I think, within the game of handling those emotions and handling plays and building off of it. It's just not there.
No, it's not. And, obviously we watch Indiana football week in and week out. We see them every game. We see a lot of this. But to me, the difference between an Indiana and a Northwestern is simply the discipline and the execution that those teams have. Northwestern seems to be able to perform and make plays when the game's on the line, not commit foolish penalties, not commit foolish turnovers. Indiana seems unable to escape those kind of mistakes. And over again, even when they play well enough to win a game like they did this week, unlike last week against Iowa, the result is the same, and on we go. And we talk about progress, and we talk about breaking through, and we talk about finishing games, and it just never happens.
Yeah, that was kind of the lead to my story. Tom Allen says the right things. I don't know that,
What else could he say?
What else can he say? But at the same time, it's like, he said these things before. People are just tired of hearing. They're tired of watching this game. I'm tired of writing the same story. It's just like it's the same shortcomings week in, week out. When you get to this kind of level and you offer this kind of performance, that is ultimately in some ways encouraging and ultimately discouraging because you just never get over the humps in the ways that continually fail this team.
It is a sort of boy cries wolf kind of situation. You keep saying we're going to do it, but you never do it. And so eventually you just start going, yeah, let me know when it happens, and then we'll actually talk about it. And I think that's kind of where we're at this point. Let me know when you actually do what you say you're going to do, and then we'll talk.
Yeah, as far as these types of games, at least against ranked opponents, the only one left is Michigan. That's in Ann Arbor. I think that kind of matchup for this team that it's not a very good matchup this year.
Doesn't seem like it.
Next week, obviously, Minnesota. So really what you're looking at, again, is an Indiana team that if they get into bowl position, are probably, once again, going to do it by the skin of their teeth if they do it again. Although, none of these games left in the schedules are in any way gimmies or any way, I'm not even sure any will be in Indiana's favor. Maybe Maryland. But
I mean,
even then,
I'm doubting IU as a favorite, even in that game. I mean, maybe that game's like a pick'em, something like that.
Which would seem fair. Yeah, I mean, it's.
I mean, Maryland lost at Iowa today, 23-0. Obviously, that's a similar margin to what Indiana lost to Iowa
Maryland's
last week,
good is very good. Their bad is very bad.
But that's on the road at Iowa. Iowa was here, so you add a few points for that difference. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Back to this one, because there are probably a couple things we should address. The 4th and 1 call. First of all, Michael Penix. We get to see Michael Penix for the first time in a month. First time he played since Ball State. And really, when he comes into the game, there's a noticeable effect. And even if you just look at his stat line, I don't think it really does justice to what I think he really brought to the field today. There were some drops, but really just having him in the backfield really seemed to give a jolt to IU, because immediately you're seeing them really, really go downfield, really just try to be aggressive in ways that they're just not with Peyton Ramsey.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get into this with the column necessarily today because I didn't want to make it just all about the quarterback situation, because clearly on a day like today, it wasn't just the quarterback that was the difference in this game. There were a lot of other issues that were the difference, and a trend that, like we've talked about, has continued. But I think if you watched Michael Penix out there play today, what about what he did does not get you excited and make you think this guy can be the guy? I mean, the way the ball gets out of his hands quickly, the fastball he throws, the way he's willing to push the ball down the field, there are just a lot of things he does that really opens up the game, I think, in a lot of ways. I mean, immediately you'd see the Penn State secondary was suddenly backing off an extra 5 yards because they knew that there was a chance he was going to go downfield with the ball. There wasn't just going to be the little underneath stuff that IU so typically runs with Peyton Ramsey. And I will say that, of course, on the opening drive of the game, actually, IU was pretty aggressive in the play calling. There was a nice play action. Ramsey went over the middle to Donovan Hale for, I don't know what it was, 15 or 20 yards, something like that. I mean, there are flashes there when Ramsey's in the game, but it seems like it's more often than not limited to that scripted first drive, and then beyond that, just kind of fizzles out.
Those plays I think are more of Penix's DNA. That's just kind of who he is as a quarterback, much more so than Ramsey.
Yeah, so I think that you saw a lot of the positive things that he brings to the game. There's just a certain buzz, and I think it didn't take but a couple of passes. As a matter of fact, I'd say that very first pass, Penix drops back and just launches one about 60 yards down the field, and I think everybody in the stands just went, how about that? So, that was interesting. It was revealing. And then IU might have saved his red shirt because they got him hurt.
Yeah.
IU didn't get him hurt.
Well, no, he didn't.
It wasn't intentional.
It wasn't intentional. It was very unfortunate for Indiana in the sense that, you finally bring him back into action. And the most Indiana football thing that could happen happened. Hurt, kind of got a double whammy. Got his knee kind of looked like it rolled up underneath of it. And also took a shot up top, ended up in a targeting call. It wasn't the targeting call that hurt him. It looked like definitely the knee. Tom Allen classified as a lower leg injury. We'll check up on that again on Monday. But
a little weird because it didn't look like, it wasn't anything awful looking necessarily. And it didn't look like one of those non-contact put your foot in the ground because it looked like it was on the tackle. But who knows? I mean, it could be anything from something minor to something major. We've seen Penix wearing a knee brace at various times since he got here in the spring as well. So, I don't know if it's an aggravation of whatever that is or something like that.
Not sure. I think if you're an IU fan, you're probably hoping that's just a sprain. But again, no real indication which way the severity of which we will probably not know for another day or so. But that you had that one play or one sequence late in the first half. Michael Penix drives Indiana down to Penn State 10 from where they had a 4th and 1. And in the moment, it was funny because I was standing up because the chairs here are terrible. It was in unison, just like half the stadium stands up and throws their arms up. Like, what the hell was that? It turns out that ball was not supposed to be snapped. They were trying to draw Penn State offside. Nearly got them.
They did draw Penn State offside.
Technically, they did. But that ball was snapped a little bit too late. It was Cam Brown was in the neutral zone for just half a second, got back in time. By the time that ball was snapped, surprised Michael Penix. He just threw to the end zone, and about half of the 40,000 would announced crowd here was just kind of like, what just happened?
Yeah, that was a play that at the time had you scratching your head, but on further explanation, you kind of get it that obviously, as Tom Allen called it, a mistake was made to snap the ball, and yet you saw why the ball was snapped because they certainly had a chance to get the offsides, but it wasn't done quickly enough, and I guess just add it to the list of fitting things that happen to IU when you try to draw somebody off sides and you successfully do so and then don't get the ball snapped in time. So you get neither the penalty nor the fourth down conversion and you wind up with 0 points.
Yeah, a lot of fitting moments here. Really, if you want to sum it up in one or two plays, or several of which to choose from, especially at the end, it gets close there with the onside touchdown, onside kick, and sure enough, holding sack. I think it ended on a holding call as well. So
fourth or fifth holding call of the day, and pretty much all of them killed promising IU drives. Mm-hmm. All of them.
Yeah.
If IU just gets a field goal on the drives on which the holding calls killed it, it could have won this game. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah, definitely.
It gets crazy.
It's not hard to see that. Anyway, yeah, I mean, this is again a game that has unfolded in so many different forms and fashions in recent years. Indiana ultimately loses 33-28, as we said. On the road next week at Minnesota. Friday night kickoff in Minneapolis.
Have fun, Mike.
Probably be warmer there than it is here right now, actually.
Maybe.
By the forecast. But, headed there next, followed by the bye week. So that'll be that. Big game, though, no doubt about that.
Yeah, one of a handful of chances left to get those key wins Indiana needs.
It was weird though. We were just kind of joking on Press Row earlier. It wasn't unfathomable to think like you could wake up next Saturday, Indiana's already clinched bowl eligibility. Like
mm-hmm.
if they'd actually given the way this was going and something weird happens and Indiana actually does win this kind of game and you go to Minnesota and beat what could be a toss-up game, probably is a toss-up game. I mean, you could have 6 wins by next Saturday. That ultimately, however, will not happen. But
no.
Interesting to think about nonetheless. But so it goes.
We'll see what happens next.
Yep.
It'll be fun.
Catch you later.